Bella had just walked across the stage, clutching her degree, her heart racing with excitement and relief. The years of late-night studying and endless assignments had paid off. Graduating from one of Nigeria's most prestigious universities wasn't something she'd ever imagined when she was younger, but now, it felt like the world was hers for the taking. Her phone buzzed in her hand, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her best friend, Laura, who had been waiting for this moment just as eagerly. "Bella, you did it. Let's go somewhere. I'm picking you up tomorrow. Just us." A break before the real world hit. Bella smiled at the message. Laura always knew how to lighten her mood, especially after the pressure of exams and graduation. It was time to let loose, to escape the world of deadlines and expectations for a bit. The next morning, Bella packed a small bag, grabbed her sunglasses, and headed to the airport, ready for a much-needed escape. She didn't know exactly where Laura was taking her, but she didn't care. She just needed a change of scenery. Laura greeted her with a huge smile at the airport, already looking like she was ready for an adventure. "Ready to leave the stress behind?" she asked, grabbing Bella's hand. "Let's go," Bella replied, feeling lighter already. Bella and Laura arrived in Ogiobi, a town nestled between hills and rivers, known for its scenic beauty and vibrant culture. It wasn't a tourist hotspot, but that's exactly why the girls loved it. The streets buzzed with life, locals haggling, children laughing, and street vendors calling out their wares. It was the perfect mix of old and new, a place where tradition thrived in the heart of modern-day Nigeria. They spent the first few hours taking pictures, capturing the moments in the streets, the bright murals painted on buildings, the laughter of people going about their day. The town had a charm that couldn't be found anywhere else. The air smelled of fresh bread and fried plantains, mixed with the earthy scent of the land. It was the kind of place that made you forget time. After a quick stop at a local restaurant, they dug into plates of ofe nsala, a rich white soup filled with fresh fish and yam. They ate with their hands, as the locals did, savoring the tender fish and the spicy, flavorful broth. Laura, always the adventurous eater, tried something new, a bowl of moi moi wrapped in plantain leaves, while Bella opted for the sweet, fried puff-puffs, each bite crisp and light. The sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows on the cobbled streets, but the fun was far from over. Laura had heard about a market nearby, a place where ancient treasures were sold, things that belonged to ancestors, relics of the past. Intrigued, they decided to check it out. The market wasn't like the typical ones they were used to, no mass-produced souvenirs or flashy trinkets. This market, located at the edge of town, was a labyrinth of wooden stalls, woven baskets, and people haggling in low voices. As Bella and Laura continued to stroll through the winding paths of the market, they were surrounded by a buzz of haggling, the sounds of drums in the distance, and the rich smells of roasted maize and smoked fish. Bella's eyes wandered over the various stalls filled with vibrant cloths, colorful beads, and hand-carved figures. But then, something caught her attention. A mirror, gleaming softly in the dim light, stood out from the rest. It wasn't large, but it was striking, its frame intricately carved with patterns she didn't recognize, patterns that seemed to move as she stared at them. Without thinking, she walked toward it, drawn to its beauty. The glass shimmered like water under the sunlight, and for a brief moment, she felt as though she was looking into a different world, one that didn't quite belong to her. Moments later, an old woman emerged from the shadowed corner of the shop, her face weathered and sharp. The woman's voice cracked like dry leaves when she spoke. "Take it, my child. It is a gift." Bella stepped back slightly, feeling an inexplicable unease crawl down her spine. "No, thank you," she said quickly, trying to hide the chill she felt. The offer seemed too strange, too sudden. But the old woman's gaze never wavered. "It is meant for you," she insisted, her voice growing softer, yet somehow more insistent. "Mirrors do not choose their owners lightly. You are its keeper now." Laura, who had been browsing nearby, turned to see what was happening. She caught sight of the mirror in Bella's hands and her eyes lit up with excitement. "Bella, this one is beautiful," she exclaimed, stepping forward. "You should take it. It's a gift. You can't pass this up." Bella glanced at her friend, unsure. Something about the mirror felt wrong. But Laura was already grinning, her usual boldness taking over. "Come on," Laura urged, her voice filled with excitement. "What's the worst that could happen? It's free. A gift. Just take it, and let's get out of here. It's not every day you get something so beautiful." Bella hesitated, looking at the old woman, who was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. There was a strange pressure in the air, like a tug in her chest, pulling her toward the mirror. Her instincts told her to refuse, but Laura was already pushing the old woman's hand into hers. Finally, with a deep breath, Bella nodded, her fingers closing around the mirror. She accepted it and thanked the old woman. A week passed after their adventure in Ogiobi. Bella and Laura had returned to the city, their heads full of memories from the bustling market, the laughter, and the carefree days they spent exploring the town. Soon, life moved forward as it always did. The both of them left for different states to begin their National Youth Service Corps, NYSC, program, a mandatory year of service after university. Laura, ever the go-getter, found herself in a thriving startup in the heart of Lagos. She lived in a vibrant, shared apartment with friends she'd made during her stay in the city. The hustle was constant, and though she loved it, there was always a sense of something missing. Bella, on the other hand, was posted to a different state entirely, a quieter place where she found a job at a marketing firm. She rented a small but cozy apartment on the edge of town, far from the noise of city life but close enough to the office. It was a peaceful place, just what she needed after years of pressure from school. Despite the physical distance, the bond between Bella and Laura remained strong. They called, texted, and visited whenever they could, sharing stories of their new jobs, new experiences, and, of course, the occasional gossip. At her apartment, Bella settled into her new life, and amidst the piles of work and the routine of her job, one thing from the past week remained constant: the mirror. She had hung it in her bedroom, directly across from her bed, its polished surface catching the light every time she entered the room. The frame was ornate, a swirl of delicate patterns carved into the edges. The design was beautiful, almost regal, like something you might see in a museum. But despite its beauty, it had an odd aura, one that lingered in the room, an inexplicable feeling that made Bella uneasy, even though she couldn't explain why. Bella's first night in her new apartment was supposed to be peaceful, a chance to settle in and shake off the exhaustion from the past few weeks. She unpacked her things, arranged her space, and even made herself a cup of tea to enjoy the quiet of her new home. She climbed into bed, the mirror gleaming across the room, its ornate frame casting faint shadows in the low light of the bedroom lamp. The patterns on its surface seemed to shift slightly, but Bella dismissed it as nothing more than a trick of the lighting. As she settled under the covers, she felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that only comes after a long day of work. But just as she was about to drift off to sleep, she felt it, a weight on the bed, a presence beside her. At first, she thought it was just a result of her tired mind, a sensation born from the stress of moving and settling into a new place. But the feeling didn't fade. It grew heavier, like someone was lying next to her, just inches away. She could almost feel the warmth of another body, the quiet rise and fall of breath that wasn't her own. She quickly sat up, her eyes scanning the room. The light from the lamp cast long shadows, but everything seemed still. No one was there. The room was as quiet as it had been when she first entered it. Just the stress, she whispered to herself, trying to convince her mind that it was nothing. But her skin prickled, and a shiver ran down her spine. She hadn't imagined the presence, it had been real. Something, or someone, had been there with her. She shook her head. "It's just a new place. Just nerves," she murmured, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. But as she returned to bed, the unease didn't leave her. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the night. Weeks passed, but nothing changed. Every night, the same thing happened. Bella would lie in bed, trying to sleep, but the strange presence would return. It was as if someone else was lying beside her, their weight pressing down on the bed. At first, she tried to ignore it. But as the nights went on, the fear and unease grew. She stopped sleeping well. The tiredness seeped into her days, making it harder to focus at work. Her energy was low, and her once bright smile now seemed forced. Each night, she'd wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, only to find the bed empty. She would stare at the mirror across the room, its surface reflecting her exhausted face, but nothing else. The rest of the room remained still. The lack of sleep started to take a toll on her body. Bella's skin grew pale, her eyes heavy with dark circles. She couldn't remember the last time she had a full night's rest. She started feeling ill. A constant headache throbbed in the back of her head, and her stomach twisted with nausea. Her friends noticed. Laura called one evening, and she could hear the concern in her voice. "You're not looking well, Bella. Are you okay?" Laura asked when they were on a video call. "You need to get some rest." "I'm fine," Bella lied, trying to brush off the concern. "Just tired, that's all." But it wasn't just tiredness. The strange presence, the weight on her bed, the feeling that she wasn't alone, it was getting worse. Every time she tried to sleep, it was the same. She would close her eyes, only to feel the bed shift as if someone was climbing in beside her. And when she opened her eyes to check, the space beside her was empty. One afternoon, Bella lay on her bed, her body exhausted, her mind clouded with confusion. Before she could think any further, her eyes fluttered shut. Exhaustion finally took over, and she drifted into a restless sleep. But this time, it wasn't just another night of broken sleep. In her dream, she was back in her bedroom, lying in the bed as usual. But something was different. The room felt cold, and the air around her was thick. She glanced across the room at the mirror, and that's when she saw it. A shadow moved across the glass, dark and unnatural. Her heart skipped a beat. She walked closer to the mirror, her legs shaky. As she got closer, she saw the figure standing in the reflection, a woman, an old woman. The same one who had given her the mirror. But this time, her face was twisted, her eyes wide and wild, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her skin was ashen, almost grey, and her hands reached out from the mirror, as if to grab her. Bella took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. The woman's mouth stretched into a grotesque grin, and she began to laugh, softly at first, then louder, until the sound rang in Bella's ears, deafening. The laugh felt like it was coming from inside her head, twisting and distorting everything around her. "No!" Bella screamed, trying to pull herself away, but her feet felt like they were glued to the floor. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The woman's laugh grew louder, sharper. And then, everything went black. Bella shot awake, gasping for air. Her body trembled with terror, her heart racing in her chest. But it wasn't just the fear that had woken her up, it was the pain. A sharp, throbbing pain behind her eyes. Her head felt like it was about to explode. She sat up quickly, clutching her head in agony, trying to steady herself. Suddenly, she felt a warm liquid drip down her nose. She wiped at it with the back of her hand, and her fingers came away slick with blood. Her heart began to pound harder, and the room spun. Her legs gave out from under her. She couldn't hold herself up. She collapsed onto the floor, her body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The blood kept flowing from her nose, pooling around her face, but she couldn't move. Her vision darkened as everything around her went quiet. And then, Bella passed out. Bella's eyes fluttered open, the bright lights of a hospital room blinding her for a moment. As she looked around, she saw Frank sitting beside her, looking at her with concern. He was the neighbor who lived in the apartment next door, always friendly, but they'd never been particularly close. Yet here he was, sitting by her side. "Frank! What happened?" Bella's voice was weak, her throat dry as she tried to make sense of what was going on. Frank leaned forward, his face tense. "You don't remember?" He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I heard you scream. A loud scream. It was like nothing I've ever heard before." He paused again, running a hand through his hair. "I rushed to your apartment, but the door was locked. I forced it open, and when I got inside, I found you on the floor. Unconscious, bleeding." Bella's hand shot to her nose instinctively. She could still feel the memory of the blood, but she didn't understand how or why she had collapsed. "Blood," she murmured, her voice shaky. I don't remember." Frank nodded. "You were bleeding from your nose. I didn't know what to do, so I called an ambulance right away." His voice softened. "I thought you were gone, Bella. I really thought I was too late." "Thank you, Frank," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude, though she could hardly comprehend the situation. "I don't know what happened. I don't feel right." The doctors ran some tests, but they couldn't find anything wrong physically apart from the blood loss. They said it was probably the stress, the exhaustion. But deep down, Bella knew it wasn't just stress. It was the mirror, the gift from the old woman. Something had changed since she took it. The nightmares, the feeling of being watched, it was all connected. But she couldn't explain it. Not to Frank. Not to anyone. 3 days later, Bella was discharged from the hospital. The doctors had given her the usual advice: rest, hydration, and no stress, but none of it seemed to help. Frank was there to pick her up. He drove her back to his apartment, where she felt a small sense of relief just being out of the hospital. Still, the unease gnawed at her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. When they arrived at his place, Bella's nerves were on edge. The thought of returning to her apartment, where everything had begun, was unbearable. The mirror, the strange presence, it all felt too close. She couldn't face it. Not yet. Bella sighed in relief. She knew Frank didn't fully understand the depth of her fear, but she appreciated his kindness. She didn't want to explain it all, not yet. That night, she stayed in the guest bedroom, but sleep didn't come easy. The bed felt unfamiliar, yet the sense of being watched still hovered in the air. She tossed and turned, the remnants of the nightmare still vivid in her mind. The image of the old woman, the sound of her laughter, it all felt too real. Frank checked on her a few times, making sure she was okay. He didn't understand the extent of her distress, but he could see she was far from fine. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "You'll feel better tomorrow." But sleep never came. The next morning, Laura called. "I'm coming to visit you today," she said, her voice full of determination. "We need to figure out what's going on." That night, Laura arrived at Frank's apartment, her presence a welcome relief to Bella. As soon as she stepped through the door, her eyes immediately went to her friend. Laura could see the toll the past few days had taken on Bella, her skin pale, her eyes tired. "I'm so glad you're okay," Laura said, rushing over to give Bella a hug. But her voice quickly turned serious. "We need to talk about what's been going on." Bella nodded and led her to the living room, where Frank was sitting, watching them both with a concerned look. Once they were seated, Bella took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly as she started to speak. She wasn't sure how to explain it all, but Laura needed to know everything, she had to. "I don't know how to explain it," Bella began, her voice trembling. "It started when we came back from Ogiobi. After I accepted the mirror from the old woman at the market." Bella paused, her throat tight with the memory of the nightmare, of the cold presence she had felt every night. "Ever since I took it, things have been off. The bed feels heavy, like someone's lying beside me. I can't sleep. I've been so tired, so sick." Bella narrated all of the ordeals she had been through to Laura and Frank. Frank spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "You can't keep the mirror, Bella. You can't leave it in your apartment either. It's dangerous." Frank spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "You can't keep the mirror, Bella. You can't leave it in your apartment either. It's dangerous. That old woman, there's something off about her, and that mirror, it's not just a piece of glass. It's affecting you." Bella looked at him, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. "But what do I do? I can't just throw it away. I don't know what'll happen if I do." Frank leaned forward, his eyes focused. "The best thing to do is return it to whoever gave it to you. Find the old woman, or at least someone who can help you understand why she gave it to you in the first place. Leaving it or smashing it could make things worse. There's power in things like that, things tied to old stories, old magic. Destroying it might just unleash something worse." Laura looked at both of them, her brows furrowed. "So, we have to go back to the market. Find that woman?" Frank nodded. "It's the only way. But we need to be careful. We don't know what this thing is capable of. We need answers before it gets worse." 2 days later, Bella and Laura made their way back to Ogiobi. The mirror was tightly wrapped in cloth, its ornate frame hidden from view. They had decided to return it, to find the old woman and give it back to her as Frank had suggested. The journey was long, and as the town approached, a heavy feeling settled over Bella. She couldn't shake the dread. When they finally arrived in Ogiobi, the market felt strangely quiet. They made their way to the small shop where the old woman had given Bella the mirror, but when they arrived, the shop was closed. They moved through the narrow streets, stopping at several shops to inquire about the old woman. It wasn't long before an elderly man, leaning on a cane outside a nearby stall, stopped them. "You're looking for her?" he asked, his voice low. "She passed weeks ago. Died in her sleep." Laura and Bella exchanged glances, both shocked by the news. She died?" Bella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The old man nodded, his eyes distant. "Yes. The chief priest of the village, he found out what she was. A witch," he said. "Used to give out gifts to anyone, especially strangers. Always with a smile, always kind. But those gifts, they weren't just gifts." "Wait," Laura interjected. "So, she's really dead? What happens to the gifts? What should we do with it?" The old man's face darkened. The priest declared that any gift she gave to someone must be returned to where she was buried. That's the only way to stop it from haunting you. The mirror, you must return it to her grave. Otherwise, it will follow you. "Where is she buried?" Laura asked, her voice urgent. She was done asking questions. It was time to act. The old man pointed to a path leading out of the town, towards a hill in the distance. "The burial site is up there. The chief priest's men performed the rites. It's where she lies. Take it there, and leave it at her grave." When they reached the old woman's grave at the top of the hill, a heavy silence settled over them. The grave was simple, unmarked except for a few worn stones placed haphazardly around it. There was no ornate headstone, no flowers. Without speaking, Bella gently placed the wrapped mirror on the ground at the foot of the grave, and a moment later, both she and Laura turned and bolted down the hill, their hearts pounding in their chests. They didn't dare look back. The next day, Bella made the decision to leave her old life behind. The apartment, the memories, it was too much to handle. She packed her things, leaving behind the place that had once seemed like a fresh start but had turned into a nightmare. Laura, always there for her, suggested they move to Lagos together. Bella didn't hesitate. They rented a small apartment together, splitting the rent and the responsibilities. It wasn't much, but it felt like home. Soon after settling in, Bella found a new job at another marketing firm. And, most importantly, the haunting stopped. No more sleepless nights. No more strange presence. This story reminds us that not everything that seems beautiful or harmless on the surface is what it appears. Sometimes, the things we accept in life can come with hidden consequences. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts. What would you do if you were in Bella's shoes? Have you ever received something that turned out to be more than you bargained for? Let's discuss in the comments. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more thrilling stories.